Today we are making chicken Kiev with gratin potato. Chicken Kiev is a crumbed chicken breast stuffed with a herb compound butter, and a gratin is a baked potato dish with cream, sliced potato and cheese that's baked in the oven. So for our chicken Kiev with compound butter and gratin potatoes, we've got three main elements. That is our compound herb butter, which we are going to make. That is our chicken Kiev, which we are going to crumb and we are going to stuff with the compound butter and shallow fry. And we have our gratin potatoes. So the first thing we do with any dish is we get our mise en place organised. That is, the first step is organising our bench top. So I have secured the bench with rubber mats underneath my chopping boards. I have got my chopping boards ready for the different dishes. At the moment I have the white one, which is going to be used for the compound butter. I have a green chopping board ready to use for chopping vegetables. And to the side over the back I have some yellow chopping board for raw poultry and the brown chopping board for cooked poultry once the dish is completed. So the first thing we have is our ingredients, and I have them all measured out correctly on my tray, as you can see here. So for our crumbing of the chicken Kiev, we have 2 cups of breadcrumbs, 1 cup of flour, half a cup of milk, and 2 eggs. That will be our crumbing. For our compound butter, we have 4 sun-dried tomatoes, we have 3 teaspoons of crushed garlic, we will be using some fresh parsley and some thyme as the herbs, and we have some softened butter here ready to go. Now I want softened butter, not melted butter. The idea of a compound butter, it is mixed together, it is in a solid state. For our gratin potatoes, we have 3 quite large potatoes which we are going to peel and slice. We have our liquid, which is our 1 cup of cream and 1 cup of milk. We have 1 teaspoon of garlic and half a teaspoon of nutmeg for flavouring, as well as salt and pepper. And we also have 1 cup of grated cheese, which we'll be adding into the gratin. Now, first thing we're going to make is the compound butter. Compound butter is a flavoured butter, okay? So like I said, the first thing we do is we start with our 150 grams of softened butter. Now, as you can see, this butter, nice and soft, I can compress it with my wooden spoon easily. Now to that compound butter, I'm going to start by adding my flavours, which is the first thing, my 3 teaspoons of crushed garlic, which I have chopped up earlier. Add that to the butter. Okay, so we're going to add our herbs to our compound butter. So that is our parsley. So we pick our parsley on our green chopping board. Green chopping board is for vegetables, of course. So we have our parsley. And I'm going to pick up all the leaves off that, peel off the leaves, leaving the stems. We don't want to use the stems. And what we are going to do to this parsley is simply roll it into a tight ball, and we are going to chiffonade. Chiffonade is paper thin slices. So very, very thin chiffonade. We do not need to chop it too much more than that, as we want to see the colour and we want to see the parsley in our butter dish. So what I do is I scoop that up and I add that to my butter. Now, as far as the thyme goes, thyme is an important element of this. We peel off the thyme, peel off the leaves from the stick. We do not want to chop the stick up. The stick is very woody. So we peel off the leaves, once again onto our green chopping board. Side. Then for this, we do want to roughly chop this nice and thin. Chop, chop, chop. scraping it to the centre so it's an easy pile. Then we gather that up and place that in with our butter as well. I'm going to now dice up my sun-dried tomatoes. So I'm going to do this brunoise slice. Brunoise is a very fine dice of 3mm by 3mm. So I start by first doing thin strips, 3mm strips of all of the tomatoes. Nice thin strips. Then I take these strips in long piles, I line them up against the edge of the knife, and then I do the final 3mm slice to make very fine dice brunoise. Once again, I do that again with all the strips of the tomato, and once again that will be added to my butter. Now I'm just going to add a pinch of salt and a pinch of pepper for seasoning into my butter. It's very important to always season all elements of the dish. Okay, so I'm using a wooden spoon. I'm going to mix all these elements together. Just mix it, just smash it all together. Incorporate it all. Mix it thoroughly. Okay, so now we have a very thick, combined, compounded butter with sun-dried tomato, parsley, thyme, and the important element of the Kiev, garlic. Okay, so for the rolling of the compound butter, I need to get a large sheet of cling wrap, which I'm actually going to fold in half. Now the reason I'm folding in half is so that it will double the strength really. Okay, so I've got a nice flat piece of cling wrap on my bench, almost the size of my chopping board. So I'm going to take my compound butter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my compound butter in a line on my cling wrap. Make sure you get all of it out. Okay. So I've made sure I've left the edges a good 10 centimetres on each side, because they're going to be my handles for when I roll it. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to fold the cling wrap in half over the top of the butter, and I'm going to press it into a long tube. I'm going to now roll it, making sure I roll that tube nicely. So I have a tube of compound butter. Now I'm going to pinch the edges nice and tight with my thumb and my finger, making sure I've got all the air out of that first. Pinch it tightly, and then I'm going to roll it along the bench. Now the friction of the bench will catch a hold of it and it will roll. Now I want to spread it out a bit thinner, and I've got a nice thick tube of compound butter. Now what I'm going to do with this butter is I'm going to place it in the freezer. Now the reason I'm going to place it in the freezer is that I want this to be very, very firm and frozen when I stuff it inside the chicken. So that means when the chicken's cooking, the butter won't melt straight away. It'll actually take a short time for the butter to start to melt to flavour the inside of that chicken. Okay. The next important element of our dish today is our gratin potato. Now I'm going to get on the gratin potato straight away, now that the compound butter is in the freezer. And it is one of the longest elements of this dish to cook. So the compound butter is a thinly sliced potato bake, and it's going to be layered with cheese, fresh cream, milk, nutmeg and garlic. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grate my potato, I'm going to peel my potato. So I have chosen large pink potatoes, as these ones are easily baked and they are a very good size. So just peel those quickly into a bowl, making sure that we are always remaining clean on our bench. So I'm peeling directly into my garbage scrap bowl. And once again, I'm still moving over to my green chopping board, as my green chopping board is for vegetables. Now once I start cutting these potatoes, what I'm actually going to do with them is I'm going to place them into just some tap water. Now the reason I want to place these into tap water is so that they do not start browning, because once you start slicing fresh potato, the slices will start to oxidize, and that means that the enzymes will react with potatoes and they will start to brown. Now I want to cut these into thin strips of about ½ centimetre. Now I don't want to go too thin, as it will cook too quickly and I will lose the appearance and the texture of the slice, as I do not want mashed potato gratin. I want a thin sliced potato gratin. But if I cut them too thick, any more than ½ centimetre to a 1/3 centimetre, it will not cook very well, it won't cook fast enough, and you will have a very hard potato gratin. As you can see, I have all my potatoes drenched in water, and I'll just set them aside while I warm my milk and my cream. So I get a saucepan, and what I'm going to add to that saucepan is 1 cup of milk and 1 cup of cream. Now I've got those mixed together here. So that is my liquid element of potato gratin. That is what's actually going to cook the potatoes in the oven and keep it nice and soft. To that potato gratin liquid, I'm going to add nutmeg and garlic, 1 teaspoon of garlic and 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. I'm also going to add a small pinch of white pepper, not too much because the nutmeg is actually quite peppery. And I'm going to add a pinch or 2 pinches of salt for flavour. So I'm going to put this onto the heat, and I'm actually just going to warm it up. I'm not going to bring it to the boil. The reason I do not want to bring cream or milk to the boil is that once it's boiled, it curdles, and what that means is the fat separates from the liquid and you have an almost scrambled egg consistency. So we just want to warm that through. Okay, so now I'm going to layer my gratin potatoes. Now the amount I've got should make about 2 to 3, so I've got 3 ramekins here to do it just in case. So what we get is we get our potatoes, thin potatoes, and what we're just going to do is, one at a time, we're just going to layer those around our ramekin, nice and flat. So and then as I've filled up 1 layer in each ramekin, I'm just going to put a bit of cheese on top, and that actually is going to help the gratin set when it's in the oven. It's going to help stick it all together. So we get a sprinkle of cheese just into each ramekin, a small amount in each. Once again, keep layering more potatoes. Now I'm just shaking off any excess water. I do not want any excess water. Now we're not going to stack it over the top. It's nice and flat. Okay, so this will slightly rise while I place it in the oven. Now, I'm going to now what I've done is I have easily warmed through my nutmeg and my cream, garlic and milk, and that is nice and hot, once again not boiled, and I'm just going to pour that over each of my potato ramekins, about 1/3 in each. Now I do not want this full to the top. I want it about 3/4 full. Now the reason I do not want it all the way full to the top is that it will boil in the oven. Okay. Now I have placed these on a tray, and the reason for that is, as I said, when these go into the oven, they will actually start to boil, the cream will start to boil, and they may slightly overflow, and that's okay. I keep them on a tray, which means I keep my oven clean. That is a very important thing. Okay, so I'm going to put these into an oven now at about 200 degrees Celsius for probably about 10 to 15 minutes. It might take a little bit longer. To see if it's cooked, we're just going to pierce it with a knife. We want that potato to be nice and soft in the center all the way through. All right, before I do so, I'm just going to put a little bit more cheese on top, just to have that gratin effect. The gratin is a caramelized browning effect of the cheese on top. Okay, so I'm just going to place that in the oven now. Okay, so now I'm going to go onto my chicken, preparation of the chicken. Now I've kept the chicken in the fridge the entire time. So that's to keep it below 5 degrees Celsius to prevent the growth of salmonella. Okay, so that's a very important thing. So following hygiene procedures while making our dish. So I've got a yellow chopping board now. Yellow chopping board, as we know, is used for raw poultry. Okay, so raw chicken breast is a form of poultry. So I take that out, place it onto my bench, throw that away. So what I'm going to do first with this chicken, okay, so I want the chicken breast to be actually whole for when I cook it. Okay, now what that means is I've first got to trim and make sure the chicken is actually quite appealing and nice. So as you can see, there's pieces of fat hanging off. So I'm going to remove that fat and make it nice and even size. So I take away the fat, trim it off neatly, make sure there's no tenderloin, and that's nicely trimmed. Take off the fat again, get rid of that. Okay, so that is nicely trimmed. I'm going to place that chicken scrap into my scrap bowl just over here, which we'll place in the bin. Now what we're going to do now is we are going to place a hole into our chicken in which we are going to stuff the compound butter. So in the top of the chicken, in the fattest side, the largest side, I'm going to pierce a 2 centimetre hole across and insert my knife nice and deep, ensuring not to pierce the outer skin. I want to actually create a capsule to squeeze that butter into both of my chicken fillets. So I want to get down nice and easy onto my bench using a paring knife, making sure we're using a correct knife for the right job. Using a paring knife, insert that straight into my chicken, all the way. So it's actually, my blade is here now, I can feel it halfway into the chicken. And I'm actually going to just slice a good gap in which I can insert my butter. So I can fit my chicken, I can fit my finger in there, I have a nice hole. Once again, I'm going to do the same thing with my other piece of chicken. Into the fat part, I'm going to insert my knife in all the way, nice and deep, and maneuver my knife inside, creating a nice big hole. Once again, I can put my finger in, and I have not pierced the outside of either side. If I do that, once it starts to cook, all the butter is going to fall out. It's going to be very difficult and the flavour won't remain. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wash my hands because I've got contamination all over them, so salmonella contamination. I'm also going to wash my knives as I do not want those to be contaminated. So I've just pulled out my compound butter out of the freezer. It's very, very hard. Okay? So I'm just going to unwrap that from the plastic and I'm going to cut it into some lengths. Now I'm going to use the yellow chopping board as the entire amount is going to be contaminated regardless. Okay? So it will be contaminated with salmonella, so it's all going to be cooked. So that is not really a problem. Okay, so I'm going to estimate how long my knife went in. Alright, so my knife went in as deep as the blade of my knife itself. So I'd place that across there, and that way I'd be able to estimate and slice how thick it needs to be. So once again, just joining them all up together. Take that right up, down the bin. Once again, chopping that. We might try and put in a few. Okay, so I do not think that it's going to fit in my hole. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut these into thinner logs. Now what you can do in the process of making this is just to roll out your compound butter thinner. So I've now got them into some matchsticks, and I'm going to insert those inside my chicken. And try and fit another one in there. Squeeze it in. As much butter as you can place in there, the better. Obviously, you are adding beautiful flavour to your chicken. Okay, beautiful. Okay, as you can see, it's not pierced the skin. I've got quite a bit of butter stuffed into there. And do the same with the other chicken. Very nice. Very, very nice indeed. Okay. So those I'll use later. Okay. So I've got my stuffed chicken. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to create a crumbing station. So I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to clean up and get rid of all this contaminated bench, contaminated salmonella, and my hands, of course. Okay. I've cleaned down and sanitised my bench. I've removed any further contamination. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a crumbing station. Okay. So what a crumbing station consists of is our breadcrumbs. Now we've got 2 cups of breadcrumbs here. I like to estimate 1 cup of breadcrumbs per chicken breast which I use. Okay, so I pour my breadcrumbs into a large bowl because I'm going to need to have space in here to move the chicken around to crumb it. So you want a nice large bowl for these. We're also going to need to use flour. Flour is what's going to actually secure the egg yolk, the egg mixture, which is going to help our crumbing. So I've got 1 cup of flour there. And then we have our egg mixture, which consists of half a cup of milk and 2 eggs. So I'm going to whisk those eggs into the milk. So it's nicely combined and have a very thin mixture. Okay, now the order of crumbing is very important, okay? So, we've got 4 elements here. We've got what's being crumbed, we've got our chicken. That chicken is going to be dumped easily into our flour, which is then going to go into our egg mixture, which is then going to go into our crumbs. So the egg mixture will help hold the crumbs, okay? Now this order is very specific, it must always be this way. Now, when doing this, is very important that you'll have hygiene procedures in place. So we're going to have 1 wet hand and 1 dry hand, okay? So my dry hand will never ever touch the wet chicken or the wet egg mixture, and my wet hand will never come in contact with the flour nor the breadcrumbs. That prevents the caking of all the mixture on my hands. So with my wet hand, I pick up my wet chicken and I place that into my flour. So with my dry hand now, I'm not touching the chicken, I'm touching the flour. I'm just going to sprinkle the flour over the top of the chicken. And once I've got enough flour on there, I can actually pick up the chicken and turn it over, because the chicken is no longer wet or moist. The flour has actually absorbed all that moisture. So now I can pick up that chicken and I'm going to place that into my egg mixture. Now I'm going to remove my dry hand. As you can see, my dry hand hasn't got anything on it. I'm going to get my wet hand and I'm going to roll that chicken into the mixture. So I'm going to have egg all over my wet hand now. Then I pick up that chicken and I place it into my breadcrumbs. And I put my breadcrumbs, sprinkle them over the chicken. I'm not actually touching the chicken with my dry hand, I'm just touching the crumbs. And I'll make sure that that is nice and crumbed. I'm actually going to do what's called double crumbing. I'm now going to take my chicken with my dry hand, place it back into the egg yolk, spin it around in the egg, and then once again place it back into the crumbs. Right, what this does is it creates a very thick coat of crumb, which we're going to use as we're going to be cooking this, shallow frying, and in the oven as well. So what I have now, holding it with my dry hand, because it is dry now, is my beautiful crumbed chicken. As you can see, the insert where I put butter is also being filled, and that will prevent the butter from coming out. Okay, so as you can see, I have one wet hand that has barely any flour or crumbs or anything dirty on it, and I have one dry hand that is also not very caked on with flour. If I was to have mixed things up, I'll show you right now, mix it up a bit, got it on there. All I've accomplished is actually flouring and battering and crumbing my own fingers, which is very messy, and we don't want to be doing that. Okay, so now we have our two crumbed chicken Kievs, nice and raw on a nice plate here. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to take that over to the stove top, and we are going to shallow fry these on each side. Now shallow frying is what's called a dry method of cookery. So that is on the stove, on the heat, with about a cup and a half of oil, which is going to fry the chicken. Okay, so I've got a cup and a half of oil here. So once it's on the stove, obviously we're cooking with oil. Oil is a very flammable liquid. You must never leave the stove. So we're going to take everything over. We're going to be nice and organised so that we can start cooking this dish. So my cooking station is now set up, ready for me to pan fry my chicken Kiev. I have got my fry pan on the stove with a cup and a half of olive oil already placed inside. It is not turned on at the moment, okay? I have got a tray here with paper towel ready for me to place the cooked chicken breasts in to absorb a paper towel here to absorb any excess oil. I've got my chicken breast right here, as well as a pair of tongs and a spatula as my utensils to turn them over. And I have a dry tea towel to hold my pan, okay, because this pan will get hot. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move the oil off the heat. I'm going to start by turning on my stove by obviously first off selecting which one I'm going to use to the front, working out which dial it is, so this is bottom dial here, turning it while pressing to start the gas flow to be lighter, and using my lighter to ignite it. I hold it in to keep the gas flowing to it just for about 20 seconds, and that's going to get it ready, and I slowly release, and now I can turn the flame on high. Now I'm going to start with the flame on high just to bring the oil to temperature. So I'm going to estimate the oil at the temperature of the oil by just hovering my hand over the oil to make sure to see when it starts to get hot. But also I can lower my chicken into it just slightly, just dipping it in slightly. And when it starts to bubble around the chicken, I'll know I can place my chicken into it. Okay. So now my oil is actually feeling quite hot. So I'm going to take one of my chickens now. I'm going to pick it up with my tongs, not my fingers, because I do not want to contaminate myself. I'm going to place that into my oil. And actually I can see that it is sizzling. I can hear it sizzling, so I'm going to place my chicken down. I'm going to get my other one and do that on the same side, lay it down. And also now I'm just going to turn down my flame because it's already reached the temperature that I want. I'm just going to turn it down to medium. That'll keep the heat. So I'm going to shallow fry these for just about 3 minutes on each side until they are golden, and I'm going to place them into my paper towel. So shallow frying them is actually going to help seal that crumb. Okay, so the crumb becomes nice and crispy and golden, and that's really the effect of what we want in any type of schnitzel, or in this case the chicken Kiev. Alright, so at this point you must never leave the stove, you must stay with the chicken. Okay, walking away at this point, my oil can become too hot, and this is a very high risk dish, risk of flame. Okay, so any oil over stove or flame is at high risk of fire. So you must always stay with it and monitor it. If it gets too hot, you can simply turn it down, or even just moving it off the heat is enough to stop that heat. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lift it and just turn it over. As you can see, it's nice and golden on this side. Okay, so the chicken's nice and golden, and once again I'm going to turn it over. Nice and golden chicken. Now this is not going to cook the chicken all the way through. We're actually going to take this chicken, place it onto the baking paper, and we're going to finish cooking this chicken in the oven till the core temperature reaches 75 degrees. As we all know, 75 degrees is the temperature that kills bacteria in chicken. So once again, we're going to leave it on this side for another 20 to 30 seconds. Okay, so it's nice and golden. I'm actually going to turn that flame off now, as there is enough heat just to finish it off. Give it a little bit longer on that side. So once again, as I said, I've got all my things here ready. So I've got my baking tray with my paper already ready to go. So I now can place my chicken onto my paper. Now the reason I'm putting it onto the paper is that I want that paper to absorb any of the excess oil. Now I'm not going to place that paper in the oven by any means. It's just for the oil absorption. Okay. So now that I've absorbed all the oil, I'm going to place it straight onto the tray itself. And I'm now going to place this chicken into my oven along with my potato gratin. So now we open up the oven and I can see that my gratin has been cooking away just nicely. It's already got a nice golden top to it. It's not quite ready yet. That's going to be a bit longer. The cream's still a bit too thin. Just going to move that to the side and bring down my schnitzel, my Kiev, slice it alongside, just place it to the back, allow that to go there, place that in, and it's all good. Okay, everything fits there nicely. Close it up, adjust the temperature. I want the temperature to be on 220. And I'm going to let that cook through. I'll come back and check it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to check that both elements of the dish have been cooked, that my chicken Kiev is cooked all the way through to the core, and the core temperature must be 75 degrees Celsius. Now to do this, I'm going to be using my pocket thermometer. Now this is a digital thermometer measured in centigrade. So I'm going to put this into the core of the chicken breast, and hopefully I will return a reading of 75 degrees Celsius or higher, which would mean that all salmonella has been killed during the cooking process. While I'm also doing that, I'll check that my potato gratin is nice and soft and cooked all the way through, and I'll do that just by poking a knife into the centre of that potato. So I have my potato gratin, I'll just pull that out, and I'll pull out my chicken Kiev. So I will do the chicken Kiev first. Now the important part of doing this is to make sure the temperature is correct, but also to select the right part of the chicken to cook. I will not poke my thermometer into the thinnest part, as that will cook the fastest regardless. So I'm going to choose the fattest part of my chicken, which is this part right here. I'm going to insert my thermometer in, and the reading is coming out at 60.8. So we are still a fair way off that being cooked completely. So now I'm going to place that straight back into the oven to continue cooking. Okay, so I'm just going to check whether my potato gratin is cooked all the way through. So I'm going to put my knife in, and my knife is actually falling by the way of the knife straight to the bottom. So that actually shows straight away that my potato gratin is cooked thoroughly. Okay, so I'm just going to place that, push that down a bit. I'm going to set that aside and let that cream thicken slightly. And I'll use a spoon and spoon it onto my chicken from the oven, and the temperature core reading of the chicken breast is 79.4 degrees Celsius. So that way we are assured that both pieces of chicken have cooked all the way through, and that all salmonella has been killed, or majority of the salmonella which would cause food poisoning from the chicken has been killed. So it's safe for human consumption. Okay, so now I've reset up my bench top with a brown chopping board ready to slice cooked meat. So now that we've cooked the poultry, we now use the brown chopping board to slice that on. I have my potato gratin, which is hot, and I've let that sit for about 5 minutes outside the oven, and the milk and cream has actually thickened slightly. It's less liquidy than when I pulled it out originally, and it's ready for me to serve up. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take one of those gratins. I'm just going to place it on my chopping board. Now the chopping board is heat resistant to a point. I will be putting a pan on there, but A ramekin that has been out of the oven already about 5 minutes is fine to sit on. So using a large metal spoon and a small one, just to help lift it out, I'm going to lift out the gratin and place that nice and neatly, still in a pile if I can, onto my plate. Now I'm going to set this just to the side of the plate. For appearance sake, let's get one more on top of that. There we go. Now I'm just going to clean my edges of my plate with some clean paper towel just where it's splashed a bit. So none of my food is going to be presented over the rim. Never ever present food over the rim, and clean up any excess areas. So I have my potato gratin on my plate now, off to the centre, where I'm now going to place my chicken breast, sliced in half so you can really nicely see that that compound butter which we spent so much time and effort making. Not just for flavour, but also for beautiful appearance. So I'm going to take out a piece of chicken, and at an angle I'm going to slice it. Now once I've sliced it, I'm going to move it quite quickly onto my plate so that the butter doesn't all just weep out. So using a sharp knife at an angle, I'm going to slice that down and place that onto my plate so that you can see where the butter has been stuffed. Just going to finish that with a slight sprinkle of just parsley over the top, just for presentation. And we now have our beautiful potato gratin presented nicely on the plate. Beautiful.